The City of Ohio State podcast takes a deep dive into the support services that keep OSU's Columbus campus running 24/7. Hear from industry experts in facilities, construction, real estate, public safety, transportation, and more. The City of Ohio State podcast is brought to you by the Office of Administration and Planning. Go Bucks! Hello and welcome to the City of Ohio State podcast. I'm your host, Dan Hedman. Last month, we toured campus construction, but on this episode, we'll talk to a group that's best known for the long-term vision of Ohio State's physical footprint, but they do so much more. Our guest is Donna Goss, the university's Director of Real Estate and a key member of the Planning, Architecture, and Real Estate Office, or PAIR for short. Donna, thanks for being with us.
Thanks so much for having me with you today.
Of course. We've had PAIR's Vice President Amanda Hofstas on a few times to discuss Framework 3.0 and other planning initiatives. I know PAIR handles capital planning, space planning, physical planning, and of course design. But today we want to shine a light on your group, the real estate team. Can you give us a general overview of the services your team provides and how many folks you have in your group?
Sure. Our group consists of 11 full-time and 2 part-time employees. We also have some students that help us out. I'm happy to be able to give them that real estate experience as part of their curriculum and support their education in that way for teaching and learning experience. We process over 250 project transactions a year, and we administer over 300 lease agreements. Our team also has oversight of 16 properties and more than 700 active easements on about 15,000 acres across the state of Ohio.
And that is that's a big operation that I think some folks just aren't aware of. So hopefully we'll get them aware here as we go through this podcast today. So within the real estate team, you have property management, lease administration, real estate admin, and project teams for the Columbus campus, regional campuses, and the medical center. But focusing on property management first, what does that entail and why is it needed for a public university like Ohio State?
Sure, Dan. I think, in terms of property management, our team negotiates and manages all the service contracts that are in place to support the ongoing operations and maintenance for the properties we own. The services typically include contracts for architectural and engineering design, other consulting services, testing services, and then they also oversee any renovations and construction services for both the capital and non-capital projects. That team also develops an annual budget for all of those expenditures to support those facilities. And they also put together a multi-year capital plan so that we can really be thoughtful about the operating and maintenance that needs to happen to update those real estate assets and make sure that the equipment maintenance and replacement is occurring to maintain that business continuity for the tenants in our buildings. Oftentimes there are research projects in those areas that are ongoing, and something like a power outage could potentially destroy years worth of research. So that's something that we would really not want to see happen, and we need to make sure that everything is in good working order to support that effort.
It's great to hear how you support that academic and research mission over at PAIR. A similar question for lease administration. What types of spaces require leases and how does the volume compare, I guess? I believe you said 300 plus leases administered. So how does that compare to other entities that do that work?
Yeah, that's correct. Actually, I just had a meeting with some peers recently. There's a group of us real estate officers, believe it or not, across the states, and we all got together a week or so ago and talked a little bit about our portfolios. And as compared to those peers, OSU's real estate and lease portfolio is quite extensive. Partly due to the amount of land that we own and our role across the state as the land grant university. But in addition to things like ground leases, building and office leases, retail leases, the real estate office supports the Wexner Medical Center and Health Sciences with their off-campus real estate needs that include leases for medical office buildings, and also some partnerships with leases with municipalities such as City of Upper Arlington, City of Hilliard, most recently as a health provider in their community centers.
And no wonder it's such a big portfolio when you factor in the medical center and some of those other partners you were talking about. As
Right.
for real estate, is it safe to say Ohio State has property in all 88 counties? And I guess regardless, how does Ohio State determine what to acquire or sell and why?
Yeah, I mentioned Ohio State's role as a land grant institution for the state of Ohio. And as part of that role, the university has extension offices in each county across the state. Most of those spaces are leased, but in terms of property that we own, we conduct an analysis to understand how the asset is performing. So, first, we look at the programmatic need for that facility and ask ourselves a few questions. Things like, is it supporting the teaching, learning, and research mission of the university in the best way possible? And if not, is there a better way to deliver that program? Is perhaps there a different location that would serve the program, students, and faculty better? And then once we've made the determination and answered those questions, we can build a strategy that leverages and maximizes the university's footprint.
And your team performs all due diligence on projects too, right? So, what does that process entail, and how does it help Ohio State remain good stewards of our resources?
Yeah, there is a lot of behind the scenes work that takes place there. So each time we consider moving forward with buying or selling a property, we perform a number of tasks to mitigate and hopefully eliminate any risk to the university. So our team works with outside contractors to survey the property, review and establish clear title and determine that ownership and make sure that title is clear, perform environmental reviews and make sure that everything is in order from an environmental standpoint. There may be some mitigation and other things necessary there to make sure that the property is safe. And we also conduct an appraisal to validate the dollar amount of the transaction to make sure we're getting the best value for the university and the state of Ohio.
How about easements? I think those are a big part of your team's responsibilities. Do you have any recent examples of an easement agreement that maybe helped facilitate a larger project or otherwise helped Ohio State in some way? I feel like that maybe a tangible example would be helpful for the listeners.
Yeah, Dan, I'm really glad that you brought up easements because that's one of those things. I mentioned some of this behind the scenes work. I think it's something that people really forget about. They kind of look at the big real estate transaction and they forget all the little pieces and parts that need to come into place to make a project happen. One example I can give you with the Wexner Medical Center just broke ground a few weeks ago to construct a new outpatient care facility in the city of Powell. So there were multiple agreements that needed to be put in place with the city and also the county to facilitate the infrastructure requirements that needed all of those things that needed to be put into place to include water and sewer easements, roadway and signage easements. And all of that stuff just facilitates the building of the project.
I think people forget sometimes about you get the land and
Mhm.
obviously you can build the building out of the ground, but then you need to hook it up to everything else. And if you're building on land that
Exactly.
hasn't had anything on it before, you need those easements. So
Right, and that is a really good example of that. That's, it's vacant land and now it's being put to use to support this wonderful resource for the community. So a lot of infrastructure needs to be put into place to do that. As you can imagine, that building and that facility will have some demands on the infrastructure. So need to put all of that stuff in place to make it work.
well, you've touched on this a little. You mentioned Powell. Obviously, the city of Columbus is another. But how does your team work with municipalities? I know there's that outpatient care center set to be built. Are there other examples? And how important is that collaboration when you're working with the city or entity?
Yeah, the real estate department really is there in the beginning, not only to negotiate the agreement and work with municipalities on all of the little details that need to be put into place, but we put those development agreements together, and they kind of cover multiple things. It's not just about building the facility and kind of the real estate needs. There's also a commitment in terms of some of the requirements from a planning and zoning standpoint, but also kind of go to the city of Dublin for the outpatient care center there. There was an agreement put in place that talked about the commitment to create jobs at the facility. And in that case, the commitment was made. The city, we promised to have a certain number of jobs there. And because of the success of everything that's happening at the outpatient care center demo, we've actually exceeded those numbers. So that's good for everybody. There's a job creation there that, is good for the city from a payroll tax incentive, of course, but obviously for the Wexner Medical Center, we have staff working there to really help to make sure that we're providing the best healthcare possible. So the creation of those jobs is just great for everybody.
I really think that shows the reach and the impact of your team with a really relevant example there. So, is there anything else I didn't ask you that you think is important context for people to know about Ohio State's real estate team and the work that you guys perform?
Well, we've talked a little bit about the behind the scenes thing. And, we're often the ones who, just kind of skate behind the radar, make sure facilitate things and make sure all this happens. But I just really like to give a shout out to the highly skilled and dedicated team that we have on board. I guess when you work in university real estate, you just have a different focus than most residential or commercial brokers and agents. We're here to support the business of the university, which is teaching and research at the end of the day. So we build relationships with the people in the colleges and units and help them develop strategy to manage their space needs. And it's really rewarding to play just a small part in creating the place where all of that can happen now and into the future. So really glad to be a part of it.
That's awesome. Well, I can't let you off the hook without bringing this up. So, for context, Donna and I, in a previous life, lived in the same place at the same time, but we didn't know each other, right? So, I was going to Ithaca College. You lived in the town of Ithaca, New York. I think that's really cool. Small world moment for us that now we're on this podcast together. But with
Right.
that said, having that background, working in that town, what brought you out here to Ohio State, and what's the experience been like being at one of the largest universities? Really running this team.
Yeah, so Ithaca is my hometown. I grew up there, moved back there after college, and I was actually working at Cornell University for a number of years. And the reason that I ended up in Ohio was because a job opportunity came open to me at Ohio University in Athens, and they received a very large gift to find a new location for their new osteopathic heritage center. So I thought, gosh, who gets to really build a new campus from the ground up? So that was an opportunity that I could not refuse, and off to Ohio it came. So, I was part of that at Ohio University. From there, I got to know the folks at the city of Dublin. From there, I got to know the folks at OSU, and here I am. I think the influence that OSU has across the state, partly because of the land grant mission, is really so fun to be a part of as part of a public university. Again, in the business of teaching and research, you even in just some small part, and all of the jobs that we do across the university, they really do add up. And I try to have that line of sight for people. It's like you might think your job might be the most mundane and kind of boring thing, but it all helps the university run and really support that mission. So just really happy to be a part of that here at OSU.
Well, we're glad to have you, and that's good insight. Donna, thanks for being with us.
Thanks, Dan.
The City of Ohio State podcast is brought to you by the Office of Administration and Planning. Until next time, be kind and go Bucks.